Hey guys, welcome back to Project Bodybuilding. After I did my Kai Green versus Kevin Levrone comparison video, link in the description by the way, I was thinking about all the Olympia robberies. After all, a lot of bodybuilding fans would say that Kevin and Kai were ripped off at least once at the Olympia in the span of their careers. But if you ask me, some of the most egregious Olympia results are from 1997 and 2007. In 1997, you had an injured Dorian Yates clinching the title against Nasser El Sonbaty, and a decade later in 07, one of the worst Jay Cutlers secured the win over the best Victor Martinez we ever saw. There were some questionable Olympia results in the 1980s, sure, but for the modern era of bodybuilding, these were the two biggest robberies. So in the same vein as the Kevin vs. Kai vid, let's compare some of the best guys to never win the Mr. Olympia. I think in terms of margin, no one has come closer to winning the Olympia other than these two bodybuilders, but never actually won the Olympia at the end of the day. In today's video, we will be comparing Nasser El Sonbaty against Victor Martinez. Now in terms of versions, Victor's was a no-brainer. His 2007 version was his best version, so I'm using that. But I wanted to make this a little bit more fair for Nasser. 1997 was a good year for Nasser, but I think he had slightly better years, and I just wanted to make sure I was comparing each guy at their best. So I consulted a series of videos from Mark's Max Muscle, and he told me that 1996 was Nasser's best version. And after watching those videos and comparing Nasser's different versions, I do agree. So we will be using Nasser's 1996 Olympia version in this comparison. It was just 1 year prior to his quote-unquote loss in 97, and to be fair, there isn't a huge difference. The main one just being conditioning, and that will help him in the long run in this comparison. And like I said, I just wanted the best man to win at their best. Those are the versions I will be using in this comparison. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the video. Remember, if you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. In the front double, I included two variations for each guy. I wasn't super pleased with either of Nasser's photos in terms of quality, cutoff, and the angles, so I just included them both instead of axing one. And for Victor, I had to include his signature tilt in this comparison. You can see that on the far right, but I did want to include just this standard front double too. So we have a lot to look at, but the more the merrier, right? Anyway, after putting this comparison together, I think these guys have similarities, but they are going to be the most different in these front shots. In terms of each guy's arms, I do like each. I prefer the balance and shape of Victor's more. Either way, if you pick Nasser here because of more size or Victor for more shapely peaks like me, I think they're close enough that we're going to have to look at other areas. So let's jump down to the lower body. In terms of the legs, I'm definitely preferring Victor. Nasser's conditioning was always a hit or miss, and while I do think his conditioning was probably the best in this version we're using, I still think he has some problem areas. And for Nasser, it was always the back and the legs. And in terms of that deeper separation, Victor definitely wins that area. And he does have better lighting and photo quality, but this is pretty consistent throughout this comparison, and just based on what we know about each guy. Nasser's legs have good conditioning, but the separation just isn't as neat as Victor's. Also, I like Victor's shape and sweep more. Nasser doesn't have the widest legs genetically, he never did. I'm not saying they're not good, they're just not the widest set of quads. So with all those small victories in Victor's columns, he takes the lower body for this pose too. And the last thing I want to consider for this pose is the X-frame / the silhouette. This is another crucial win for Victor. Like I said, Victor had better quad sweeps than Nasser, and both guys are very wide up top. But since Victor has the wider bottom half, he has an overall better X-frame. Now I will say, up top, Nasser is wider. He's got huge lats and he's just bigger than Victor. And his legs aren't at all bad in the grand scheme of things. So I do think this pose can go to him, because not only does he bring an okay silhouette, but he has a massive set of arms. But overall, I like Victor's arms more and his lower body more, as well as the silhouette. And on top of all of this, I just like Victor's flow more. Everything on Victor ties together very nicely. He has much nicer shape, better balance, and looks more like a statue. Nasser is more of a freak, a bodybuilder's bodybuilder. And if you want that, a little more size at the cost of a little aesthetics and conditioning, like I said, I can definitely see those arguments for Nasser. So even though I am picking Victor in this pose, I do think it can go either way. This is mainly coming down to personal preference and Victor having a slightly more aesthetic physique. In the front lat spread, I'm not super pleased with how Victor looks in this one. I thought this would be another win for him because usually those who win in the front double end up winning the front lat spread as well. This is usually because things that are rewarded in the front double are also key areas for the front lat spread. But Victor has one main issue. His lats are hiding. His waist looks a little wider here now, which obscures his V taper, which means his lats don't look as impressive. And then his arms are so huge that they're actually covering and hiding a lot of his lats. Sure, we can still see a lot of them and some of the taper, but I expected a better outline. His proportions are a little off now. He looks a little bunched up. Overall, he just looks weird to me. And then when you take a look at Nasser in the lats, he wins easily. He has a wider frame to begin with, and this is true for the overall lat to lat width as well. And he looks to have good taper too, at least on par with Victor. And this is even with Nasser crunching the abs down instead of pulling his upper body up. Those are advantages you have as an almost 6 foot and super wide bodybuilder. Most guys can't crunch the abs in this one because they're going to look less wide in the lats and their waists are actually going to look bigger. I think Nasser pulls it off quite well. He has the width to spare, so he opts to showcase his abs. So we get a nice bonus for this pose with those abs, and Nasser maintains his taper and is still wider than Victor. Now this area, the torso, the lats, and all that kind of goes with that area is a big win for Nasser. But other than that, I do still think Victor scores wins in every other area. He wins the chest with all that rippling detail. I do think Nasser's pecs look really thick and dense, but having a ton of striations suits this pose better if you ask me. I think Victor also wins the arms for what they're worth. He has clearer separation between delts, bis, and tris. And like I said, they're huge. Probably too huge because they hide his lats. But that does mean he gets that small win in the arms. And finally, in the lower body, I once again have Victor. You can really see what I meant here about Nasser's narrow legs and the lack of deep separation. Victor has the sweep, the clear separation, and just the more appealing set of legs overall. Anyway, this would have been an easy win for Victor if he just had the better torso. But the lats and the torso as a whole, really besides the chest, is a clear win for Nasser. And like I said, that includes the lats, which are obviously the biggest piece of this puzzle. So Victor does kind of limit his margin of loss with all those smaller wins, but at the end of the day, the lats and the width are important enough to outweigh all of that easily. And since Nasser won those areas, he takes his first pose with the front lat spread. The first poses may have been at least somewhat competitive, but the side chest is definitely the closest pose so far. Honestly, depending on the day, I think I could really pick either gentleman. So let's break this down a little more thoroughly. Look at the lower body for starters. Victor has lost his advantage in the wheels. This doesn't mean Victor is bad now, but things are now a bit more even since Victor can't show off his superior sweeps. I think both guys are probably pretty similar in terms of size. Nasser probably does have a touch more hamstring drop though. Now in terms of lower body conditioning, Victor also loses his edge here. Now I think they're again just even. No one's glutes are striated, but they at least have some separation between quad and ham. For all intents and purposes, I just called this a tie. Now shift your focus up to the midsections. This is kind of a rarity, but both guys are actually consciously flexing their abs and obliques here. Victor has his hands a bit lower so we can see a little bit more of that midsection detail, but if you look at Nasser, I wouldn't say he's exactly worse, especially if these two had the same photo resolution to work with. Honestly, both guys get a point here for just remembering to keep it tight. Now before we jump into the pecs, let's talk about the arm. For the actual arm, including the bi and the tri and the forearm, I gotta go with Victor. He's got a little more size in the forearm and the same size as Nasser through the bi and the tri, but he has a little more of that peak on the bicep. So I think he gets a minor win there. But just going up a little more, I'd give Nasser the delt. He's just bigger there. Victor does sport some nice striations though. So now we're at the pecs, and honestly, it's pretty close. Both guys have completely developed pecs from striations, the thick upper pec shelves. But since I have to choose, I am going with Nasser on this one. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think he just looks to have a denser quality to his pecs. Victor has a lot of pop, but Nasser looks to have some more dense muscle. And Nasser's far pec is protruding out just a little bit more than Victor's. Like I said, both guys do have striations, but honestly, I think Nasser may have more. I think he's at least even in the pics we're using here, but think about it. Nasser's photo resolution is not as good as Victor's. This photo was literally scanned out of a magazine. So you have to think, if Nasser looks this detailed in this kind of photo, if I saw these guys in person on the same stage at the same time, I think I would easily give the detail category to him. Now finally, zooming back out, I think it's close overall. The side legs are about even. Victor won the arm, but Nasser won the delt. Victor's really showcasing his midsection and his thinner skin helps with that, but Nasser looks great too. And finally, Nasser only narrowly won the pecs. Like I said earlier, I think I can go with just about anyone on this one, but with the slightly better pecs and probably a little more overall thickness and density from this angle, I have to go with Nasser. When we turn these guys around, things get a little interesting. And no, probably not how some of you were hoping, I'm actually talking about the backs themselves. I did go ahead and include two photos of Nasser. I really like the one in black and white, it's the clearest photo I can find, but I do think black and white helps in some scenarios, so I went ahead and included a poorer quality photo, but one that was in color. So up front, I do like Nasser more. I think, again, like in the side chest, he just possesses a denser quality to his physique, but he also has a watery quality to his physique as well. I still think his back looks thick and rugged, if you will, but there seems to to be a layer of water covering it entirely. So although he does have a dense look, all the details blur together, which weirdly enough makes his back the weakest area of this pose for him. And he does lose some other areas to Victor. The glutes are definitely going to Victor. Nasser's watery back has apparently started leaking into his glutes because he's got some soggy glutes now too. Victor has some faint striations in his. Now in the hamstrings, oddly enough, I actually prefer Nasser. Usually where you see watery glutes, you see watery hams too, but this isn't the case. Victor's hams look good, they're detailed and developed, but I do wish he was posing them a bit better to show them off more. But regardless, Nasser's hams just look thick and gnarly. And with the added separation he has in this area, I do think he prevails over Victor in this aspect. Going up to the actual back department, I don't necessarily think Victor is more developed than Nasser, but he is drier. He has a very faint Christmas tree and he doesn't have that film of water over his back. Victor's back really isn't blowing me away though. He doesn't have an insane amount of detail, but still he is super wide, although that's not as important in this pose. So I would give Victor the win in the overall back, but this is really only because Nasser dropped the ball here with his notorious lackluster conditioning. I suspect that if Nasser was as dry as he could be, he would have smoked Victor in this shot, but we have to judge what we can see. Finally, I want to address one more area, the arms and delts. It's so weird that Nasser is so dry and detailed here, but in the back he was a water buffalo. It's exactly like how it was in the hamstrings. He's not really out of shape or holding any water here. Like if you just showed me Nasser's back, I would take a guess that his hams and delts and other areas would all be that watery. But no, that's not really the case here. With the extra detail and of course his leg up on mass and density, he wins both the delts and the arms. Victor's not throwing his arms back enough, which hides his front delts and makes his overall size of his delts disappear. And the same thing kind of happens with Victor's peaks. He's like tilting his wrists and arms forward, which again is hiding certain elements, including his bicep peaks. I did expect him to win the biceps with his superior peaks, but like I said, Nasser is just thicker here and somehow more detailed. He's got striations in the delts, feathering in the triceps, and a thicker set of bis and tris with good peaks himself. So Nasser wins the upper limbs. And honestly, zooming back out, Nasser won a lot. He won the hams, the shoulders, the arms, but he lost the key area being the back. But it's not like it was underdeveloped. It looked massive, but it was just watery. Victor only won 2 areas in this shot. Victor only won the back in this shot by a little and then the glutes. So this is probably going to be a controversial call, but I still got to go with Victor on this one. But at the same time, I'm not really too keen on this one. I do still prefer Nasser despite the conditioning in the back. He still looks massive and rugged, more massive than Victor as a whole for sure. But Victor has a notably tighter and drier back, which is the most important part of the pose. And he still has great hamstrings and he won the glutes. So it's not like Victor only wins because he won the back. He's still very complete and very sharp. I just have to give him this one because he won the namesake of the pose. The watery back is a big markdown on Nasser for this one, even though he had great wins in the hams, delts, and arms. I think objectively, this one would go to Victor more often for the slightly better back, but subjectively, I side with Nasser on this one. The rear lat spread is an overall better pose for Nasser, I believe. I know he doesn't look the cleanest, but let's face it, he's extremely wide. Nasser was almost 6 foot tall and he had incredible shoulder width. And when you move to the rear lat spread, there's a lot less emphasis put on the detail aspects of the pose, so that film of water he had over his back isn't as detrimental in this shot. Victor does check off a couple of boxes that Nasser doesn't though. Although it isn't as important in this pose, Victor does now have the more detailed back. He has some faint Christmas tree striations going on the lower back if you look closely, and the upper back muscles poke out a lot more clearly on his physique. The most important thing that Victor has though over Nasser is the taper. Victor cannot beat Nasser in overall width. He's too short and too narrowed compared to a big guy like Nasser. But Nasser's waist is a bit wider too, not just his lats. Victor has a smaller waist from this angle, and that makes his overall V-taper more pronounced, which does make up a little for the overall lack of width because he now has the illusion of a little more width. The last advantage I'd give to Victor are again the glutes. I still think Nasser wins the hams again for the same reason as in the rear double, and also look at those calves. Some of the best to ever grace the Olympia stage. They have that perfect heart shape and they insert super low too. So for what it's worth, Nasser does win both the hams and the calves in the lower body. Now like the last pose, I am a bit conflicted on this one. I have Nasser winning the width department and the hamstrings, but Victor is more shredded overall, wins the glutes because of that, and also has a decent set of hamstrings with that, all while beating Nasser in taper. I think the rear lat spread is actually flipped for me from the rear double. I now like Victor here more rather than Nasser, and this one may also be a little controversial, but I think objectively Victor does win this one more often. This is honestly a closer one though because they trade off in the key areas of the back, but Victor's extra polish is what seals the deal for me. Nasser's extremely wide, but again his back looks like mush to me. I know detail doesn't matter that much, but with that watery look combined with the lack of decent taper, it's kind of making his back look like a blob of Play-Doh. I still think he looks very dense and he is very wide, but I do think there's more of a case to be made for Victor. He has an excellent V-taper, great lats, and more detail. This next pose, the side tricep, is going to be a quick one. I really just don't see too many differences between these two. I think for all intents and purposes, they have pretty similar everything. I think overall Victor has slightly more detail, but Nasser has a lot more thickness. In the side leg, that argument holds up. Nasser does look a lot bigger, but Victor has a couple of extra details, but that's not really enough to outweigh that. And because Nasser has clean hamstring and quad separation, and again a little more size, I actually prefer him. In the midsections, I do think Victor again is just a hair drier. But Nasser's midsection is great too. He's got oblique detail and good ab separation. Both guys win here, but Victor wins a little more. In the pecs, both guys are full and have the nice square look to their pecs. Again, really both guys are winning. Maybe Victor can snag a slight win here with his extra pop, but again, what's really the difference? Now in the arm, delt size specifically, that's Nasser's win. But Victor has a little more visible striations. Now finally, in the tricep, I think the shape of these guys' horseshoes are similar. I do think Nasser is just notably bigger here while being defined enough to showcase all of his horseshoe and the separation from the delt and the bicep. And when you zoom out, I again think there's more mass on Nasser's frame, and from this angle, like in the last side pose, he's thicker as a whole from the side. And with a win on the tricep, the side leg, and the overall thickness from the side, I'm giving Nasser the edge on this one. I thought the abs and thighs was a foregone conclusion. I preferred Victor's legs in the first two front shots, I preferred his waist and taper in the front double, and I've been saying that Victor's conditioning has been better from every angle, and conditioning is a more important aspect in this pose. But to my surprise, I have Nasser winning the abs and thighs. Now there are two pics in this one, and one of them, the photo on the left, is not from '96. That left photo is from 1997 if I remember correctly. What I do know at least is that it's not from '96. And the only reason I wanted to include it was because it was the only good pic I can find of Nasser like this. The one from 1996, the photo on the right, cuts his legs off, and the only other photos I could find from '96 were from weird angles and just had poorer quality. But I think the case for Nasser in this pose is made on the right photo. I just wanted to include a photo of Nasser in full view so you guys know that I'm not just pulling certain conclusions out of my ass. But we will be focusing more on that 1996 photo, obviously. Anyway, how does Nasser win this one? Well, in the abs, I prefer everything about him to Victor. Nasser has very symmetrical abs, but hey, so does Victor. But I like Nasser's blockiness to his abs a little more. I like the good chunk to them. And he has deeper separation between his abs. Victor's are not etched as deeply. Now in terms of the actual taper, both guys are good, but I again have to go with Nasser. His lats are huge and extremely wide, which helps him create a slightly better taper, even if his waist may be a little wider. The angle does obscure it a little bit for '96's photo, but if you look at the left photo, you can see that Nasser does still have tremendous taper. Victor's abs are not bad, and his taper is not that bad either, but I'd give the edge to Nasser on all fronts. Now in the quads, I do still prefer Victor. This is mainly because of one thing: detail. Nasser can hang in the mass department, sure, but his separation, while okay, is not good enough. Victor has deeper separation everywhere, he's drier, and he's sporting feathering too. So now we have a situation where each guy wins either area. But I have to say, call me crazy, but the abs have always mattered to me more in this pose. Maybe I shouldn't judge like that, but I think subconsciously we all do look at the abs first in this pose. And that is an area Nasser wins. And he is okay in the quads, but Victor does win fairly easily. So for me personally, I prefer Nasser. I have him winning this one. I prefer his core development, and when you zoom out and look at the entire pose, I like how he's put together. I honestly like his flow more. I think it looks powerful and developed. With that said, I do see the arguments for Victor. He wins the quads and has good abs, you can't deny that, and I'm not denying that, but Nasser's pose is just working for me more. For the most muscular pose, I do want to judge two variations. Then we'll combine how I feel about both to get the overall winner of the most muscular pose. We're starting here with a crab variation, and I do prefer Nasser, I would say pretty easily. Now Victor does measure up quite well. This is mainly because of how round and 3D he is. He has the illusion of having more muscle than he actually does because the muscle that he does have is just bursting full. But Nasser just has more muscle to begin with, and once again he has that hardness and that density to his look. He has more detail as well. He has more chest striations, a gnarly upper chest split, and more shoulder striations. And he just straight up has the better chest, delts, and traps. He's just packing more meat on in those areas, more thickness, and he has more defined details. The only area I'd give to Victor is the arms. I like the fullness to the triceps more, but Nasser is still very thick in his bis and tris. You can maybe give Victor the legs too, but they're not really that important in the shot, and Nasser looks okay here too. So for the crab variation, Nasser wins this one fairly convincingly. Now on to our second variation, we have the hands clasped most muscular. This is a pose where I think Victor fares a lot better in. I still think Nasser is good, but he's not as dominant as he was in the crab version. He was showcasing a lot of detail and showing off his superior thickness and density. Now I think he's back to looking like the less conditioned one. At most, he's tying Victor in that department now. He still has more chest striations, but now that deep chest split isn't there, the shoulder striations aren't too present, and he doesn't have the best arm and delt separation here. And the legs look pretty blurry now. Victor overall looks drier. He has clearer separation everywhere. I think think he wins the conditioning in the wheels, and he sports more striations in the chest here, whereas in the last pose he didn't have any. Nasser still probably beats him in the chest regardless, but when you consider the better lower body condition and the drier look, I do think Victor has a slight leg up in overall conditioning. But of course, what about muscle? In terms of thickness, density, things like that, I think Nasser still pulls off a win. His legs, although blurry, look very thick. The arms are thick, so are the delts, and that chest again has that dense quality to it. So sure, Nasser wins in looking thick and dense, but with Victor's 3D look, I think he looks just as muscular overall. Overall, Nasser looks thickly developed, but body part for body part, Victor scores a lot of key wins. With those cap delts, he wins the shoulders. It also really helps that his shoulder caps aren't blurring into his triceps and biceps like Nasser's. He has clear separation as to where the delt ends and the rest of the arm begins, and he has a lot of pop there. I think Victor also wins in the arms. Again, this is just because he's fuller and has more pop from that tricep sweep all the way into the peak of his biceps. Now, in terms of the midsections, even though Nasser got a win in the abs and thighs, I think Victor wins here just because of his more streamlined appearance. And finally in the legs, like in the first two front shots and the abs and thighs, I do prefer Victor's to Nasser's. Victor has great sweep and just more separation. I think Nasser's quads honestly look the best in this pose specifically. They look very thick, but they're just too muddled for me. They look to almost have a melting quality. So overall, I think Victor does score a slight overall win in this pose. I think his 3D muscle allows this pose to work for him a lot better than the crab variation did. But Nasser is not far behind. He looks very thickly muscled, and after all, this pose is all about having the most muscle. Now, having said this about the hands clasped variation, I have to average these two variations of the most muscular to determine a winner. And I think it's pretty obvious, but Nasser wins the overall pose here. I thought his crab variation was a decisive win, and although he lost the second one, it wasn't by much at all. And when you average that together, I do think he wins the last pose of this comparison. And now we've made it to the end of the comparison. But before we go into my scorecard, let's see what you guys had predicted for this comparison. I put out a poll with the same question as the one we're posing in this video, pun not intended, and the majority of you, 62% to 38%, had Nasser winning this one. And I agree. Taking a look at my scorecard, you can see Nasser gets a win by winning 5 poses to Victor's 3. And honestly, I could have had Nasser winning 1 or 2 more. I can't really say the same about Victor. I think some fans are already going to have Nasser winning the front double because he looks massive, and I do think there's an argument to be made for Nasser winning at least one of the back poses. In Victor's case, I really wouldn't switch any of Nasser's wins over to him. I think all of Nasser's wins were pretty solid. I think the front lat spread was convincing, and so was the most muscular. And even though I do see arguments for maybe Victor taking a win in the side chest and the side tri because both guys were looking pretty similar in both poses, I don't think I would change my vote too often on those, thanks to Nasser's superior size and thickness, which helps a lot in those side poses. So sure, on paper I didn't have Nasser winning by much, but if you allow me to expand on that, you'll find that I was actually pretty partial to Nasser at the end of the day. I definitely could have had Nasser winning more mandatories. I do believe though some guys out there will actually have this flipped. I think if you look at this from an aesthetics perspective, or maybe a whole physique lens, then you'll probably be going with Victor. And that's not inherently wrong. Some guys are just going to say Victor had less flaws, which is honestly probably true. Some will say Victor also had better conditioning, and that's definitely true. And sure, in some areas I think Victor did have better aesthetics than Nasser. But Nasser, while not the epitome of aesthetics, isn't exactly unaesthetic. Some shots didn't look the most pleasing, and he doesn't have the best taper from every angle. But you don't win shots like the front lat spread, almost the front double, and especially the abs and thighs without at least holding it together in the aesthetics column. So overall, I can see a parallel universe where I'm just looking for the best looking physique, and I just want to see the most aesthetic guy win, and in that case, I would have to have Victor on this one. But in this universe, I think Nasser wins in terms of being the better bodybuilder, and that's what wins in the entire comparison. He was outmuscling Victor in a lot of these shots, and let's be honest, this is a bodybuilding show, not a small waist contest. Nasser was just freaky dense and thick in a lot of these poses. He was the most developed, maybe not the most balanced, but he brought more muscle while being aesthetic and conditioned enough. And of course, he won the most mandatories too. So in this comparison, pitting Victor Martinez against Nasser El Sonbaty, the two best guys to never win the Mr. Olympia but did come the closest, today's winner is Nasser El Sonbaty. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know how you saw this comparison. Let me know if you disagree and had Victor winning, or maybe you had Nasser winning by an even bigger margin in your own judging. Leave me your thoughts down in the comment section. By the way, if you guys are looking for any high quality supplements, head over to armsracenutrition.com. And whatever you pick up there, whether it be protein powder or pre-workout, use my code PROJECT10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. That's code PROJECT10 at armsracenutrition.com. Finally, if you guys like this video and want to see more just like it, hit that like button and subscribe for more. With all of that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Gotta get that Lexia.